Hello everyone, in this video we will be creating a new process that we will be debugging in our own debugger software. So we need to create a new process. We can use the create process a function from Windows API to create a new process. So I have created a new folder debugger and put a mod.rs file. So this will make the entire folder as a create. So I'm going to create a new structure called debugger. Now I'm going to write one implementation function. So let's call this as create new process. So in this function we are going to create a new debuggee process. So the software which we are debugging is called debugger, and the process which we are debugging is called debuggee process. So let's create a separate function, create debuggee process, and it will take the process name, string slice, and we need to initialize the startup info and process information before calling the create process a. And startup info. So sorry, that was a weird error. So we are setting the CB value of the structure to the size of the structure itself, otherwise you will get an error. And the process information, so in this process information we will have the process ID, thread ID, and process handle and the thread handle. So before that we need to convert the string slice into U8 buffer. Process name dot bytes dot collect as vector of U8 bytes. Let's call this as p name, and we need to add an ending null byte to indicate that this is the end of the string. Now we can use the create process a, and the application name we can pass the file path or the process name like notepad.exe or cmd.exe. So for now let's pass in the command. So the second argument is the command line. So pname dot as mute pointer, and the third one is process attributes. We can set them null, and thread attributes null. Inherit handle is 0. So what this means is, if this process creates any other child process, so whatever the inherit handles are set to true, those handles from this process will be inherited by the child process this process creates. And creation flags, here we need to set a flag, create new console, and create no window if you do not want the child process to show up. And we can pass the debug only this process and debug process. So we have two options here. So debug only this process means we can only debug this process. In the debug process, we can debug the child processes our new process creates. So let's create a new window. So create new console and debug only this process. So that should do it. And the environment null, current directory null, and startup info and process information. And the return value is the u32. If the function succeeds, the return value is non-zero. If the function fails, return value is 0. Let res is equals to, so if res is equals to 0, then we are going to return an error saying that creating process has been failed with the error get last error. So we can call this get last error to retrieve the last error. Else we are going to return of the process information. So the PI contains the process handle, thread handle, and process ID and thread ID. So let's change the return type, result of type process information and string. So now we are good to go. So we can use this function create debuggee process in our create new process. Create debuggee process and pname, let res is equals to. Now we will get either process information or an error string stating that why the create process has been failed. So if res.e is okay, so that means if the function succeeds, a new process has been created, then we are going to print created debuggee process with PID. Let's unwrap the result. Let's pi is equals to results.ok.unwrap. So we will be unwrapping this process information and storing it in pi variable. Now I can call pi dot process ID. And now we can return this process information and also the self. So we need returning self means we are creating a structure object. So result of self and string. So here we are going to return OK of pi. So okay, now we are fetching the process information, and then we are going to create a self of pi. So we need to add our process information here, process information, call this as process information pi. So now if the debugging process has been created, then we will get a debugger object. So the self indicates the object of this structure. So let's cut the print statement here, and we can use it in our main program. So create debugger create new process, and notepad.exe .unwrap. Let's call this as debuggee, and there is no way we can access the process information because this is not a public member. We can make it public, but we can write another wrapper function, get process ID, because you do not want user to modify this process information. So we can say self. So why self means this function applies only to the objects of this debugger type. You cannot call the function without having a debugger object. So this function can only exist whenever the debugger object exists. So we are going to return the process ID self dot process information dot process ID. So let pid is equals to dbg dot get process ID, and now we can do the pid. So let's go and run this one. There are two errors. Okay, I have put utils correctly. Okay, we are good to go, and the new process has been created. So we have successfully created a new debugging process. It does not show up because our process exited, and the new debugging process has also exited. So in the upcoming videos we will see how to attach to the existing process and also handle the debug events. So that's all for this video.